Okay, now that we have both Cam Studio and Virtual Dub installed, it's time to go through quickly what Cam Studio can actually do. Now, this is going to get a little complicated because I'm actually using Cam Studio to demonstrate Cam Studio. So, for example, this is Cam Studio running, doing this capture right now. You can see here there's certain statistics regarding what it's actually capturing. When it's not running, this black box here actually contains a Cam Studio logo. Fortunately, I'll be able to go through the Cam Studio options while it's running. So the first option here is under Region. You can select what region of the screen is going to be captured. So you can choose full screen, you can select a region when you start the recording, or you can select fixed region. Now, the larger the area that you capture, the larger the resulting file will be. So you don't really want to capture anything bigger than what's absolutely needed. So you'll notice in this capture, because we're only dealing with a very small area of the screen, I've set it to 640 by 480. In the previous video, because we had a lot of things going on, I recorded that at 800 by 600. Like I said, the larger the screen capture, the larger the file. So I try to avoid full screen wherever I can. Also, by focusing only on a certain area of the desktop, it means that the audience is not going to be distracted with trivialities. It's not going to be squinting to try to see what you're doing in one small corner of the desktop. It's all right there, right in front of the screen. So if we click on fixed region here, I can either manually enter in the height and the width, or I can choose the select button, which will give me a box, which I then drag to set the area that I want to capture in. You can only capture a square area. It can't do irregular shapes or circles or anything like that. It's just a rectangle or a square, and you set that to wherever you want it to be. Okay, under options, now you'll need to change this when you get Cam Studio started for the first time. To start with, out of the box, by default it doesn't record audio, so you'll need to click on here to make sure that there's a tick next to the record audio from microphone. Then under audio options, it's audio options for microphone. You'll want to make sure that the capture device is the headset that hopefully you'll be using while recording your videos. As you can see, I've got quite a few devices I can choose from, and I've chosen the headset to do my recording from. The default compression format is LAME MP3. I prefer to use PCM because you get a higher quality out of it. Now, it does create a larger file, but we can modify that later when we've finished our recording using Virtual Dub. And we can always go from a high quality audio file down to a lesser quality and smaller file size, but you can't go back the other way. So I always, because the audio is one of the most important components of this, I always start with a high quality audio component. So you click on choose format, and I change the format from this drop down to PCM. Lame MP3 is what it is by default, so you switch to PCM, and 22 kilohertz 16-bit mono is more than adequate for a voice track. And click OK. And the other option you want to change is video options. By default, Cam Studio uses this one at the top here, the Microsoft Video 1, which is not a very good codec, and certainly not a good codec for screen captures. It creates very large files, and they're not very good quality. So we went and downloaded the Cam Studio lossless codec, which is specifically designed for screen captures like this. So go ahead and select that. You'll also notice that yours will be grayed out here, and that's because it auto adjusts by default. So you want to take the tick out of that box, because auto adjusting doesn't always work real well. So take the tick out of that box, and then you can manually enter in these values. You can feel free to play around with these values yourself, but I found that these work very well for PowerPoint and other types of screen captures. So we set keyframes every 20 frames, we capture a frame every 50 milliseconds, and we run at 20 frames a second. Just to give you a guide, NTSC TV runs at about 30 frames per second, so does PAL, and movies that you go and see at a cinema run at about 28 frames per second. It doesn't work the same way with computer screens because they're flickering much faster. But again, we don't have a great deal of action on the screen, so 20 frames per second is probably more than enough. The more frames you record in a second, the larger the file is going to be. So if we had a lot of motion, if we were recording a video game, for example, we may want to push the frames per second up. But because we've got fairly simplistic action on the screen, we can run that down to 20 frames per second, and as you can see, it looks quite fine. Okay, once you've made those changes, you're now ready to start your capture. So you would then, in your case, click on this, what's for you a red button, and your cursor will be surrounded by a square dotted box, which will match the size you set in region right at the beginning. You just place that wherever you want to on the screen, and once you click, the recording will start. Now, you don't even have to have the Cam Studio in the recording. You can move it quite easily, and then you can see I've got this space on my desktop where I can move things in and out of frame. You don't even have to have Cam Studio running. There are options here under keyboard shortcuts to set up certain shortcuts so that it will start and stop and pause and cancel without even having to see it on the desktop whatsoever. It can just run minimized in the taskbar. The other option I'll show you, I don't personally like this. I don't know why. I see it, lots of people use it, and I have no problems when they do use it, is the auto pan option. We'll set the speed first, because for some reason they always set the speed too low. And when I turn the auto pan option on, what it does is that box frame will now follow my mouse. So as I move my mouse around the desktop, the camera frame will follow the mouse, which can be useful when you want a small video size but you want to show a lot of action. I'll just turn that off now. So we're back to our standard camera frame that doesn't move. That other option I moved was the auto pan speed. You'll notice if I set this down, I'll set it down very low. Now when I enable the auto pan, I'll move my mouse, and it takes quite a while for the camera frame to keep up, which is it's not really a bad thing. It certainly can help if you think you're getting a lot of jarring when you move the mouse around. Okay, I think that's just about it for Cam Studio, and I don't want these videos to get too long and too large, so that'll probably do it. You can have a play around with Cam Studio, and then in the next video we'll start using it to record a PowerPoint presentation.